The conference is going to be opened by the Honourable Paul Goldsmith. So he's the Minister for Regulatory Reform, Tertiary Education, Skills and Employment, and Science and Innovation. And so Paul was first elected to the National Party list in 2011, and in 2016 he was appointed to those ministries. And before entering Parliament, Paul created his own business as a historian and biographer, focusing on New Zealand history and economic development. I've seen him speak at a number of conferences, and he's really supportive of science in a range of forms. So, Paul, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Well, good morning, everybody, and thank you for that warm introduction. And it's great to get out of the parliamentary hothouse for half an hour or so before we get back into it. And as the election approaches, everything gets a little bit warmer and a little bit more heated. So thanks for the opportunity. I want to acknowledge Craig Stevens, President, and all of you here this morning. Look, I thought I'd talk a little bit about how the science and investment fits into the broader government agenda that we have. So, at the starting point, what are we trying to achieve in government? We're trying to raise the living standards of New Zealanders in the broadest sense of the word. And you can do that, of course, by growing the economy, but that's not the only way. You can deliver better public services, better quality healthcare and education, and all the things that the government provides is another way to improve the living standards of New Zealanders. But that's not the not the only thing that government does. We talk a lot about the economy and living standards, but I actually also see an important role in preserving and enhancing what is special about New Zealand as a central role of government. And we often think of the quality of our environment in that context, but also around our relatively high levels of social cohesion, our relatively high levels of trust and low corruption. Those sorts of things are precious in this country, and how we preserve those over time in a changing world is a great challenge. And then also, I think, we're with 4.5 million people in possession of some islands there, and the fourth largest exclusive economic zone in the world, and so we have a contribution to make at a global level as well. And when I think of all those things and what we're trying to achieve, I'm very conscious of the fact that our science establishment or ecosystem in this country can make a powerful, and does make a powerful contribution to all those things. If we think in terms of growing the economy, world-class scientists can help provide and generate the ideas that will power our companies and make them more internationally competitive, and we see that in many ways and shapes and forms. But also, good scientific understanding helps inform our government decision making, so that we can have evidence-based decision making in the many public services that we deliver and provide. And when we're seeing that in a whole variety of ways, but just also thinking of the recent developments of scientific advisors going into many government departments, and Sir Peter Gluckman started that, and we've got Margaret Hyland here who's going to be speaking soon. But certainly as a member of the Cabinet, sitting in Cabinet committees, quite often we are seeing the chief science advisor from government departments coming in and making a powerful contribution to the debates, and being that connection between the research community and a voice and a champion for more evidence-based decision-making in our government and what we do. I think that's a powerful contribution and significant change over the last few years. So you see that strong contribution to government decision-makings in order to deliver better public services. But then of course, when we think of preserving what is special and the quality of our environment and all those sorts of things, you're immediately, of course, drawn to the massive contribution made from the science contribution to our understanding of how to clean up our waterways, our understanding of the oceans in which we survive, and all those things are very, very significant. And then if you think about, okay, but we're not also we're not a nation of freeloaders. We also have something to contribute to a global understanding of the human condition in the world in which we live. Again, we see the powerful contribution made and not just when we think of, well, when the world looks at us, what would they expect us to know a bit about? They'd expect us to know a bit about the geology of this place, that expect us to know a bit about the oceans that surround us, the southern oceans, our climate. They'll expect us to know a bit about how you manage losing biodiversity in one of the last land masses that reached by humans. And we do, and we have a global contribution to make, and that's why I was pleased in the budget. We also strengthened our standing in scientific investment in Antarctica, for example, which is one area that New Zealand does make a real global contribution and better understanding of the world around us. And so, if we take a step back and look at our science system as a whole, where, in this budget you might have noticed we again made a very substantial extra investment in science. So we're looking up to $1.6 billion a year in science. Some of you might not think that's enough, but believe me, it is when you look at the tough decisions that governments have to make about where to put extra resources every year. For the last few years, there has been consistent and substantial new investment in science from this government, and it's been right across the board, from that pure research of the Marsden Fund through to ongoing investment in the PBR effort, the universities to strengthen the research side of the university and long-term research, through to the Crown Research Institutes and the mission-led science of the National Science Challenges, which are set out to create answers or provide answers to some of those problems. I had a great day. It was last Thursday down in the Hawke's Bay, visiting a couple of the science challenges, the New Zealand Biological Inheritance. Went out to Homoana on the coast there and looked at some of the new traps that they've been developing with Wi-Fi connections, and so as to greatly enhance the efficiency of trapping and monitoring pests in that area. And I note that the theme today is beyond the usual suspects, and that was a beautiful example, it seemed to me, of how you have leading researchers from universities and Crown Research Institutes working with the DOC, with the local government and the representatives they've made, and also volunteers from the community, all working together to help solve national problems. It was a wonderful example. And then I went further up the road to meet with Shane Cronin, the chair of the Resilience to Nature's Challenges, and we looked at some of the effects of rising sea levels and erosion on the coastline, and the efforts that they're trying to understand how best to deal with communities and build, have decent discussions around how to deal with those things, which is part of that broader science, and again dealing with the local government and the local communities as well as scientists and universities. And so I think those national science challenges, which have they haven't been easy to put together, but they are starting to come together, and a real example of how we can draw in players from all throughout the firmament. So if we think of that pure science, the mission-led science, through to the efforts that we're making in the business space, trying to encourage the private sector to invest more in R&D and in science, and so we've seen an extra 350 odd million invested by New Zealand companies over the last couple of years in R&D, much of it provided by the broader science communities of the university and the CRIs, and a significant increase over the last about 29%, and we've been trying to achieve that kind of growth for a long time in this country, and that's why we were keen to put some extra resources into the Callaghan Growth Grants, which we did in the budget this year as well. And so there's been I think that the message I'd give you is that we as a government very much understand the powerful and very important and very significant contribution that science, in the broader sense of the word, makes to all those things that we seek to achieve in government, whether it's growing the economy, delivering better public services, solving and preserving what is special about New Zealand, and also making a contribution to the world. And we're willing and able to continue to invest more in that area. We're only able to do that because of the overall disciplines of the government, budgetary process. That if we look around the world, and I'm sure many of you connected internationally, you'll see in many parts of the world some of the public science areas coming under pressure, and they're coming under pressure because of governments that haven't been able to keep their finances in order. They're running massive deficits and under real pressure to find savings around the world. We in this country are fortunate in the regard that we're running a surpluses, and we have choices about what we want to do with our resources, whether it's investing more in public services, investing more in infrastructure, which we need to do as a growing country, and or paying back debt so we've got that resilience when the next crisis comes along, as well as continuing to invest in what you would call the innovation strand of the economy, which is so important longer term. So I just wanted to mention a couple of other things that I think I'm quite pleased of, in the sense of the progress that we're making around I suppose related to the theme of beyond the usual suspects. I'm sure you've followed the progress of the regional research institutes that we established a couple of those a year or two ago. One in the Wine Growers Research in the Marlborough, and the Centre of Space Science Technology in Alexandra, and we're in the process of deciding about whether the next round, which we'll be announcing in the next little while, and that I think is a useful project to ensure that our science isn't just concentrated in the main centres, but can be seen and visible throughout the country. I did also want to mention the real progress that we're making with the roadmaps. And last week with Nathan Guy, we released the primary sector roadmap, and I think the purpose of them is that over the years we have as a government and local government and in the private sector invested very considerable sums in areas, and but perhaps the overall coordination and strategy of that investment hasn't been as tightly defined as it may have been. And so the purpose of those roadmap documents that you will have seen, and there was a conservation and environment science roadmap released a few months ago by Mackie Barry and Nick Smith, I think it is a useful process in drawing together and trying to get a clear understanding of what the priorities are in any particular area, and ensuring that the investment that we make is aligned to those priorities. On Thursday I'll be with Jonathan Coleman looking at the health research strategy as well, which is the first time that one of those has been drawn together, so that we can again get a clear sense of direction in that area. The other thing that I would mention that we're very proud of has been the nation of curious minds, because we all know that a lot of what goes on in the technological and social space and the space and the speed of change does continually raise that question of the social license for scientists to do what they need to do, and secondly to provide the skilled workforce in order to be able to do the work that we want to do. And so it's so important. I think, I note that Royal Society's comments recently around science technicians and the need to ensure that we continue to provide a good workforce in that area. We've reached a state in this country where wherever you go that people are crying out for skilled workers in every industry that you come across, and I think that the science community continues to have that challenge of how do you inspire and encourage and enthuse the next generation to get involved in science. And that Nation of Curious Minds program, I think, is a wonderful one. Whenever I get out into the countryside, I try and meet up with school groups who are doing wonderful things, little things, funny little things quite often, but just ways to engage with the community. I saw the little caravan out in front of Te Papa, which they drag around to little towns and get kids looking at wasp hives and all the sorts of scientific issues that you're dealing with. So I think that's been a wonderful project, and I'm ensuring that it'll go further. So I think that's enough from me, other than to say on behalf of government, in the broader sense, thank you for the work that you do in the many different agencies that you're a part of. We do value your work immensely. We try and give you all the resources that we can. We're very focused on ensuring that the science system in New Zealand is sustainable long term, and that it can continue to make the powerful contribution that it's made for so many years. And noting the 75-year history here, but it goes right back to the early days. My background is as a historian, and my MA thesis I wrote on was a guy called William Colenso, who was one of the first missionaries here, but also one of the first scientists really in New Zealand, a mad keen botanist and collector of specimens way back in the 1830s and 40s, and so science obviously is and going back into the original Maori population as well, has always been an essential part of who we are as humans. That desire to understand the world which we live in, and to understand where we came from and what we're achieving. Those fundamental questions are the most natural thing in the world for us to contemplate and to try and understand it. And so thank you for the opportunity to be here, and very happy to answer any questions as long as they're not too tough. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much, Minister. Kind offer to answer a couple of questions. We focus on the topic. I have a question. So I'll be talking about it in my talk a little bit, but can you think of some mechanics or ways of making science more visible in Parliament to MPs across the spectrum? I know we have this sort of Speakers Science Forum, but that's quite a limited thing, and I feel like there's opportunities to get more of our stories across.
Yeah, I think the science dinners that you have are very powerful. The problem, of course, in Parliament is that there's always so many competing things on at any one time, and so it's a hit and miss as to how many people will turn up. And I've gone along there once or twice and felt a bit sorry for the scientists who have poured their heart and soul into these wonderful presentations, and there's been a smattering of MPs along to listen, and so that's a practical problem that many people face. I do think the simpler the better it is in terms of presentations of stories, but also I'd make an effort to continue to invite MPs around the country to come in and see the work that you're doing, whether it's things such as the Nations of Purest Minds, but all the institutions, the Crown Research Institutes, and all those entities. I know the people are very busy doing what they're doing, but every opportunity to invite members of Parliament in to see in little groups to see what's going on, I think would be very worthwhile. Yeah.
Sort of a related question. New Zealand scientists have been told over the decades, sell yourself, get into the community. The trouble is, the reason why you're not getting funding is because you're not connected enough with the community. Politicians just can't bring up the money, etc. But I'd actually like to get your opinion. Just how can we help ourselves going forward? Because clearly we face some major challenges globally. Doing relevant science, cutting-edge science is getting more and more expensive as the years go by. And governments try and keep up with all, as you say, lots of pressures. How can we help us? What do you think is the future for us trying to help ourselves as up in the cabinet level? Have you got any perspective?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think you do a pretty good job in many respects. I mean, if you look back over certainly the last 7 or 8 years of which where we've had very tight budgets, science has continued to receive a lot of new investment, because I think there's a clear understanding of the contribution that it makes and the need for a country such as ours to have that strong research core driving us. So I mean, I wouldn't underestimate how well you do relative to the many other pressures that we face. But I think it's just a sort of a water on the stone sort of thing of just keeping keeping on the efforts of talking about what you do. It's difficult because a lot of the work is takes a long time. I mean, I think of this in
Well, I
terms
suppose
of
what I'm fearing is that I'm not fearing, but I can see coming through in the grant procedures and stuff, impact, economic, health, whatever, how we can make impact and demonstrating that impact question. And of course, sometimes it's very hard to see the impact of science.
Yeah, but I mean that's one of the great tricky questions of the age. How do you demonstrate that? I think we've got a draft paper coming out on that very question of how to define impact, which will be making the rounds in the next little while. And it's I mean every bureaucrat in the OECD and around the world spends a lot of time trying to define that and work it out. And so I mean I think it's important to spend a lot of time thinking about these things, but also to let people get on with the work in hand. And to have, personally, I think it's important to have a period of relative stability around the structures of science, because there has been a lot of change, and change can be, it does have its costs. And so, certainly in my role, I'm not suggesting everything should be frozen exactly as it is, but I'm not anticipating huge revolutionary changes in structure. I want people to focus on the task at hand and do as much science as you can and build on the structures that we've got, and acknowledge that it does take time. If you look at the National Science Challenges, for example, I every now and again will come in and say, well, come on, what have we got so far? And you have to acknowledge that it takes years, and these things are long term, and one has to be patient. So a lot of science investment, it's about casting your bread out on the water, and you don't know what's going to come back.
There's probably just one more question.
That was a really good point for me to continue my question, because I was thinking about your National Science Challenges comments and how they kind of co-created and designed with the research community. And I was wondering if there is scope for other research funds to be done in a similar manner, that the purpose, all of the outcomes that you're seeking, those long-term views, could be co-designed with the people that are doing the research?
Well, yes. I mean, I think there's ample scope within the system for those conversations to have. I mean, we have a range of support for investor-led, inquiry-led investigation, where people do whatever they feel strongly about, and also the mission-led side where there's more direction and alignment, and then all the funding systems do try and align with the National Science Challenges and National Science Strategic Framework, or whatever the exact title is. I lose track sometimes. But there is plenty of opportunity for engagement, and in the I think we should continually question those and make sure that they are appropriate. But there is a certain core logic to much of what we focus on, and those National Science Challenges, I think, capture a lot of them. I mean, if you think of what are the real challenges facing New Zealand, and it takes you to sort of understanding the geology. And if I'm an Aucklander, and I think it's pretty obvious that we should be spending a bit of time sort of trying to understand the Auckland volcanic field, because that's pretty important, and the oceans around us, and so understanding how our primary product based sector economy can continue to do its thing while preserving and enhancing the quality of our environment. Those sorts of questions, there is a certain logic to a lot of what we do, and that's I think recognised in a lot of the structures that we've got. But I mean, it's important to keep that conversation going.
Okay, thank you very much, Minister. If you could join me again in thanking the Minister.
All the best, and I hope you have a great day.
Thanks for making the time.
Thank you.